Welcome back to the Kool, Kareem Matthews podcast. I'm your host, Kareem Matthews, and I want to just quickly thank everyone, man, who listened, commented, gave your criticism, good or bad. Thank you guys. Keep that. This week, man, I'm glad to have on, this is comic, actor, entrepreneur, and I like to call, the best part is I call him a friend, Mr. Alonzo Bodden.
What up, Kareem? How you doing, brother?
What's up, Zoe?
Not much, man. How you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. It's crazy because, whenever I have somebody on, I go through like my little mental Rolodex to kind of prepare for this. And we've known each other since the late 90s.
Yeah, I know. I know. It's funny how what do you say? Time flies when you're having fun, right? Yeah,
Man,
we go back over 20 years.
that's that's crazy. Whenever I say that to people or whenever I say that about somebody, it's just amazing to me, man. It's literally the connection of comedy. You know what I mean? Because I had Ahmed on, and that's where I met Ahmed was at Dublins, and that's where I met you. You know what I mean?
Yeah, well, the good thing about that, we're still in the game, right? 20
Uh,
years later, we're still here because a lot of people have fallen off, left the game, straight jobs. We've even lost, sadly, we lost some of the boys, and but yeah, we're still here.
I know that's crazy. During the pandemic, we lost a couple people. You know what I
Yeah,
mean? That is crazy. But I just remember, man, Dublin's Ahmed when Ahmed was on, he said Dublin's was like a time of innocence in comedy for all of us. You know what I mean? And I feel like that was the perfect way of putting it. At least for me, it was. You know what I mean? That was like my introduction to a lot of the, I would say, business part of Hollywood came through Dublin's.
yeah. In a sense, in a way, for me, I always look back at Dublin's as the most creative time of my career
Mm-hmm.
because it was like every week work on something new. And it was fun, but it was also, the creativity also came because there were so many great comics hitting that stage, right? But no one had, well, like Dane started to blow up, and Ken
No, you
Jeong,
right. You right. You was about to
you
say
know,
no one had blown up yet. You just
yeah,
say
Dr. Ken had maybe got his first part in a movie, and Craig Robinson, nothing yet, Ralphie May, nothing yet. I mean, it was like right before, it was the 2 or 3 years before everyone started to pop and find their voice and find their own way. So the talent level on that stage, I'll tell you what's funny. I don't know if you bumped into people who used to hang out who were like in the crowd, and they're like, "Damn, we had no idea how much talent we were seeing every week."
for free.
Yeah,
No, man, it's funny because again, a man was saying a similar thing. Like he listed all the comics that hit that stage before they had really like taken off. It's just, and I was saying to him, I don't know if we could recapture that time ever again because that was pre-social media. You know what I
yeah,
mean? I
yeah.
mean,
Well, it was MySpace, right? Like Dane was the first comic to become famous on MySpace,
right.
because he figured it out. I Listen, Jay has tried to recreate Dublin's numerous times. Ahmed has talked about it. You can never, it is my opinion, you can never recreate it for us because that was the
Mm-hmm.
time for us. Just like if you ever like read comedy or look at the books of the old days, like Seinfeld and Leno and all of those guys, they were all in New York in the 70s, right? And at like Catch a Rising Star and Dangerfields and whatnot. And that was their Dublins. That was where they learned it. That's where
Came of
they
age.
started doing it, right? And then in the 80s, they all blew up and became stars, right? So I think every generation or every group has some spot. You know what I mean? Like there's a spot right now where comics are working out. Well, Today it's in a Zoom
Right.
somewhere, but you know what I'm saying. That and their generation is coming. You know, that's what I think it is. I think every generation of comics has somewhere where they develop and then they blow up.
Right.
And it's you can't recreate the same place for anybody.
Right. And you can't bring it back once they've blown up. Because that was
Right,
part
right.
of it. Was no one had blown up yet. So everyone was just showing up on a Tuesday night with no ambition, you know what I mean?
Well, I give you an example. Def Jam.
Mm,
Remember when they tried to redo Def Jam?
right. Not yeah,
Couldn't
it
do
never
it.
worked.
Couldn't do it because in the '90s, you had Bernie Mac and Chris Tucker and all of them coming on the scene and blowing up like they hadn't been on TV yet, and suddenly they were on Def Jam, and it was crazy, right?
Right.
And then they tried to do it again in the 2000s, and it was like, nah,
No,
nah,
no.
you can't. There's some things you can't do again. They tried to remake Living Color.
Oh, right, right.
You
Yeah,
know,
no.
you
And again, because that was a moment of time in a lot of those comics and actors' careers where it was just perfect timing. You know what I
right,
mean?
right. David Allen Greer, Jim Carrey,
Jamie Foxx.
even Jamie Foxx.
Right,
They
right.
were all they were like club headliners, or they were small. I don't want to say small name actor, but
Oh
early
yeah.
in their acting career, right?
Right, right.
And then they got that show, and it was like,
Boom.
but you can't do that again. You ain't gonna find another Jamie Foxx just hanging out.
Right. Undiscovered. Yeah, because I was looking at it from the perspective of how social media would have changed the whole environment. You know what I mean? Like a lot of things that we did, we couldn't have got away with social media. But your point on just the timing as well, I think makes even more sense. Like we were just all at this place where, again, nowadays we probably couldn't bring all those people together like that. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if social media would have made us more famous or would have diluted the pool.
I think it would have been the dilution part. That's what I'm saying. I don't think we could have kept going what we had going with social media because social media it speeds everything up. You know what I mean? It would have
Yeah,
tainted it
yeah,
up
I know what you're saying. Yeah, it would have burned out sooner.
quickly. Yeah,
Hmm.
exactly. Because like Ahmed, again, when Ahmed was saying we was getting Britney Spears in there, Justin Timberlake, Vince Vaughn, like those people wouldn't have been able to just hang out like that in
Yeah,
the
that's
social
true.
in the social media era. You know what I mean? They would have got their spot would have got blown up. So
Yeah, that's definitely true. Everybody would have known who was there. We'd have had paparazzi in the parking lot, and
right.
it would have been funny. The paparazzi would have been there, not looking at the comics.
Looking for the crowd. Yeah, nah, man. And it's crazy because I was saying how for like the first, not the first, but I would say for like 5 to 10 years after Dublins, most of the things that I had going on in my career stemmed from Dublins. You know what I mean? Because I met my manager, well, my manager back then at Dublin. So
Hmm.
I could trace basically everything I was doing well into the early 2000s directly to Dublins. Because like for me, that was my first experience with like the industry part of comedy.
Right.
Like that was the first place that I would do regularly where someone in there could actually help your career. You know what I mean? And that's kind of what they were looking to do. So for me, that was like my first exposure to that. And it's crazy because from Dublin, I said I got my manager and I did Montreal. And I did Montreal, New Faces in Montreal in '01. Do you remember that? You were
Yeah.
there. And it was I don't know how they got this together, but we had a basketball game. They had us
Hmm.
playing basketball, and yo, you were dunking in construction booths. I was
Well,
like, what the fuck?
I will tell you something. Those days are long gone, but
Oh,
it's funny because the basketball game I first went to Montreal in '97, and I'll
mm,
always love Montreal because I feel like that was where I got discovered, right? Like I
mm,
went up there, I came back with a deal and quit my day job and everything.
In '97.
Yeah.
Mm.
But so every year the industry versus comics basketball game was like a thing. But it got so serious they had to stop the game because they were worried about people getting hurt because
Mm.
people started going out for blood. It was like, yo, man, these ain't NBA tryouts. These are,
Right.
and I could dunk, but I remember Ben, what is Ben's last name? Who did Cash Cab?
Not
Damn,
Glebe.
no, no, no. I'm gonna Google real quick
Okay.
because I gotta give him his props.
Right, right. But yeah, I vividly remember you dunking in construction boots, or they may have even been
Yeah,
10.
Ben Bailey.
Oh, yeah.
Remember?
Okay.
So
Right.
I didn't know it, but Ben was like, I think he was a D1 college ball player.
Oh, okay.
Like Ben had game, and Ben came on the court, and I don't think many people knew how good he was,
Right,
and
right.
he just went off. It was funny watch. It was like, whoa, Ben got game. But the best thing about the basketball game, that was how I got my first gig in Vegas. Okay, there was a guy, Steve Sharippa. Steve used
Oh,
to
yeah.
book
Yeah, the ribs.
the
And then he
Riv.
did the Sopranos.
Yeah, and Steve was one of those like fat athletes. You know the guys who they're kind
Mm,
of fat, but they're still athletic. And
mm.
Steve could ball. He could ball.
Really?
So we were playing, and Steve said to me, he said, "Hey, I'm gonna have you in Vegas. I'm gonna get you to my. And he did. And he had never seen me on stage. Like he just saw me playing ball, and he
Wow.
booked me to the Riv.
Oh, that's great.
But yeah, man, those were fun. But they had to stop that game. Then they started a hockey game,
Oh,
and it
that's
was like,
safer.
we done.
Yeah, yeah, that's safer than basketball. Let's play hockey. Let's give them sticks. Nah, but it's crazy because '01, Kevin Hart was there. Kevin Hart was in
Yeah.
this in '01 because I remember after he saw you dunking in construction boots all in the game, he just kept trying to throw you lobs.
I wish he'd throw me a lob or two in his movies now, man.
Right? Throw me a lob now, of anything. Okay, so yeah, that's crazy. So you said you first went to Montreal in '97.
97, yeah, I did New Faces in 97. And I'm still, well, yeah, I mean, up until everything shut down, I've probably been to Just for Laughs 20 times. I mean, they were calling me the mayor of Montreal. I'll tell you the funniest thing was when Kenya Barris, who created Blackish and all of that,
Oh, mm-hmm.
he came up there. He was doing like a seminar on producing, and they were giving him an award. And he came up to me and he was like, "Yo, man, I heard you the hookup up here in Montreal. So what's?" And I'm laughing. I'm like, "Didn't you just sign $100 million deal at Netflix and what? Like you asking me for a hook, man?"
That's love. Again, throw me a lob. You know what I mean?
Oh, believe me, I cracked on him about not giving me a job. Believe me, I did.
Hilarious. And I remember we actually hung out in Montreal that year.
Yeah.
We went shopping. I don't remember where we went, obviously, because it's Montreal, but yeah,
Well,
we went.
that's the great thing about the festival, right? And I was just doing a thing. We were talking about this. It's summer camp for comics, right? It's the only place that we all see each other because at like you and me when we bumped into each other, what was it, about 2 weeks ago?
Mm-hmm.
I hadn't seen you for a couple of
Years.
years,
Right,
right? And
right,
it's just because your career went this way, my career, like everyone's career grows and it is what it is. But Montreal is a place where we all just come together, and yeah, we do hang out, man. You go to lunch, go shopping, go buy sneakers, and it's
right,
crazy, but it's fun because otherwise we only see each other on the poster at the club saying, "Oh, Kareem's gonna be here in 2 weeks. Oh,
right,
Alonzo was just here."
right. Or on TV. You
Right,
know?
on a TV spot or randomly, for 5 minutes. So it's one of the fun things about Montreal. I think one of the funniest things that I saw in Montreal was Chappelle was up there, right? And Dave was riding a skateboard to get around. Like that was his thing.
Wow.
And we were laughing because people were like, man, that guy on that skateboard looks like Dave Chappelle, right? Never, because they would never think, no, that is Dave Chappelle. He's riding a skateboard.
Right. And that's the other thing about having it in Montreal. It's that kind of city that gives you that kind of freedom like that. You know what I mean? Like
Yeah,
walking
it's
the
a
street.
walk around
Right.
city, and you hang out. You know, you ate on the patio before you had to in
Right.
Montreal,
Right.
right?
Right.
And
Right.
you do, you randomly run into everybody, like you said, from Kevin Hart and Dave Chappelle to open micers, or just somebody from the road. Or the other people I run into there that I love are the comics from Europe and England,
Mm.
because I never see them. Like once a year I see Jimmy Carr, or I see guys from Australia or whatever, because again, it's international.
Right,
So
right, right. Yeah, now and also the industry, not only the comics that you bumped into, but the industry as well. Like you said, being able to play hoops with Sharifka and having him say, I'm gonna have you down in Vegas. Like again, that was my first exposure to that was Montreal to that level of industry. And then it's crazy because it's like when you come back, LA is kind of like womp womp womp. You know what I mean? For
yeah,
like the
well,
first month or so. You walk into a room, you're like, there's literally no industry in here right now.
my relationship with the industry at Montreal, I love it. I have a freedom, because I don't worry about them, because I got nothing new to show them. Like,
Mm,
it's like, look, you know who I am. I've been here every year. So I love the excitement. I love the excitement of new faces, or people doing a gala for their first time, or, stuff like that. I love that kind of stuff. And I still have experiences, man. I met Don Rickles in Montreal. You know what I'm saying? Like, that was the one of the greatest things
right,
in
right.
comedy, to sit backstage and have Don Rickles cracking on me. Don
Mm,
Rickles, right?
legendary.
But when it comes to the industry, yeah, man, I got nothing new. But the nice thing about that is I'm under no pressure. You know what I mean? Like, I'm not under pressure to do a showcase for them, because they already know who I am. I know who they are, and if we're gonna work together, we're gonna work.
You don't seem to me, you don't come across as the kind of guy that succumbs to pressure. You know what I mean? Like, even knowing you way back, like, you always just been kind of like, this is what it is. You know what I mean? So I
That
don't,
is that's true. You know why? Because I love the comedy. Listen, I would be, if I worked harder on being famous, I'd have been more famous.
mm,
But I always just love doing the comedy, and it's a lesson, right? So now, I'm an old head, and young comics come to me, and I tell them, man, publicity, marketing, all of that, you have to do all of that, because for me, and I've done all right, but I just love the comedy, man, and being a comic. You know what I mean? Like, to me, it's more important to have the respect of the other comics than to have a deal with, or the respect of NBC.
man,
You know
because whoever got you that deal at NBC, they could be gone in a year or two.
exactly,
You know what I mean?
exactly. But
These comics, that feeling, that respect from them is like eternal. You know what I mean?
when you can walk into any green room and just sit down and be welcomed and start talking, and not be the most annoying thing is the new comic who walks in and wants to prove he's funny.
Mm,
So he's trying to be funny in the green room, and we're like, shut the fuck up.
right.
Just like, the stage is
You.
out there. This
Right.
is us.
Man. No. Totally, yo. Totally. So okay. So you say you never really have done it for the industry, but you have had some industry success. You know what I'm saying?
Oh,
Like,
absolutely, absolutely, and it's been good. Listen, I've had a great run, and I've worked with some great people, and some great people in the industry have helped me. It's just, there's a certain part of it. You know what I never figured out? I never figured out how to sell in the room, right?
mm,
When you go to the meeting, and you've done these meetings, and this is for your listeners, right? And you walk in, it's a conference room, and there's 6 or 8 people, and maybe 2 of them know who you are, and the other ones pretend they know who you are, and everybody's like, "Let Kareem, we love you, Kareem. We want to get into the Kareem business. We love you." And right, and you're sitting there, and in the back of your mind, you're like, "This is bullshit," right?
Right, right.
But you have to know how to be funny in that room.
Hmm.
And I never learned. I shouldn't say I never learned. I didn't care enough about being funny in that room because in my mind, I'm like, none of you have been to Kansas. I'm funny in Kansas.
Right.
I'm
No.
funny in Louisiana. I'm funny in Virginia. I'm funny in Sydney, Australia. I'm
It's
funny
funny
in
in
Honolulu.
Bucharest.
You guys have never been beyond Hollywood Boulevard, and you're judging me.
Mm. Man, that says it right there, yo. 'Cause that's the thing. I'm always leery about judging of comedy. You know what I mean? Because I always say comedy is like ice cream. You know, it's like 31 flavors sells 31 flavors for a reason. Like
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. I've never heard that, but that's absolutely true.
some people love rainbow sherbet. Me personally, I can't stand rainbow sherbet, but they still sell it. You know what I mean?
I'm gonna steal that from you, man. I'm stealing that.
No problem. It's yours. You know. But yes, but leading into that though, but you again, you've had success at that because you won last comic.
Yeah, last comic was fun. Now, when you talk about pressure, that was a weird kind of pressure, right? Because this was the way I looked at it when I was doing it. Every Tuesday, somebody was getting fired, right?
Mm,
Because that's when the eliminations were. I mean, from the beginning, from when you go in and you do your first 3 minute set, right? Every Tuesday. So my whole thing was I just thought about don't get fired this Tuesday. Don't get fired.
mm.
And then 6 months later,
You
I
still
was in the
hadn't been
finals. I hadn't gotten fired.
fired.
And honestly, that was the way I looked at it. And I never thought about it. Like there was one time I was doing a set, and my brother, who's my best judge, right? My brother knows me in and out, backwards. He said, "Yo, man, you were thinking about the money." He said, "You
Mm,
weren't thinking about comedy. You were thinking about the money." He said,
mm.
"Forget that shit and do comedy," right? And
Were
it was
you?
great advice. It was
Were
great
you?
advice. And
Were you thinking about the money?
yeah, I was thinking about winning because it was a lot of money. But um, I didn't realize how big it was until I went back 2 years after I won. They brought me back as a judge,
Hmm.
and I got to see how many people tried out. And
Mm,
that's when I felt like, wow, I
mm,
beat a lot of fucking people. You know what I mean? Because I
right.
would never think, I never thought beyond the stage I was on, right? So you start out, you done the audition. You start
Mm,
out at the Improv that night, and then with us, we went to New York, and then we went to Vegas, and then we went to the final TV part. But
mm,
I would never think about anything more than the room and the stage I was on. And again, when you talk about pressure, it's because when we did Last Comic, it was still a big show. It was like a huge show, right? So when we got to the semifinals, they said the rating, they said like 10 million people were watching.
mm.
So just sit back and think about trying to make 10 million people laugh.
Right. It becomes overwhelming. You got to break
Exactly.
it down. You know what I
So I
mean?
was like, I'm just going to be funny here in the theater.
Right.
I'm going to let the director put it on TV.
Right.
I'm doing this room. That was always my way of making it manageable, of being able to handle it. Because if you look at the big picture,
Yeah.
it's too big. You'll lose
Yeah.
your mind.
No. Yeah.
You know.
I would have definitely had to broken that down into just like you said, just this room. You know what I mean? Just this room right here. So okay, so you finished second one season, then you won the next season, right?
Right. I was a runner-up on season 2. John Heffron won. And
Mm,
the way they would do it is you would be downstairs while the comic was on stage. Like if you were performing, I'd be downstairs and you were on. and they brought me upstairs just in time to hear, ladies and gentlemen, Kareem Matthews, and your applause as you walked off, right?
Mm.
So we wouldn't see the other comics until that night when the show was on TV. And
Ah.
I remember watching it on TV, and I saw Heffron's set, and I was like, damn, he won. Because he had a
Mm.
killer set. I love John.
Mm.
And me and
Mm.
John have competed. Like he reminded me, like we did Star Search together, and we did this
Wow.
other show. We'd gone head to head. So I was up. I was still up 2-1, but he had won the big one, right?
He won the big money though. But
so So when they asked us to do season 3, which was going to be like the all star, the 10 comics from season 1 versus the 10 comics from season 2, I went in that feeling like I was the favorite. Like it was a weird pressure. You know what I said? It felt like it was like when Tiger Woods would play golf, and it was like they expected him to win. Like
right.
there's 50 other golfers, but it's like no, it's you and
Against
then all of
them.
them.
Right.
And
You in the
and no
field.
disrespect to the other comics, because there were great comics on the show. Great comics on the show. Gulman and Rich Voss and Ralphie May and
Mm.
Kathleen Madigan, Tammy Pescatelli,
Oh
and on
wow.
and on. Great. But personally, my personal thing was I gotta win this shit. This is
Mm.
you know, this is my second chance. And I gotta win. So I went all out, and then I won, and they never aired it. They never showed that episode because NBC had canceled the show, and that was a whole different scandal. Jay Moore got into a big fight with NBC and all of that, but
It
it was a
never
great.
aired.
They never aired it, man. They never aired
Oh,
it. They showed a little like clip thing on Comedy Central, but yeah, NBC canceled it and it never aired.
wow. But you still got the host though.
I got the cash, man. I got the cash.
Eh,
That was my thing. When they said they canceled the show, my only question was, do I still get paid? And they were like, oh yeah, you still get paid. I was like, all right, we cool. We cool.
That's hilarious. Yeah, I think I've auditioned for that show. I think 2 times. Once when you were the host, and then one year when Bill Bellamy, or no, when you were the judge, and then one year
Right.
when
I
Bill
was a judge and Bill was a host.
host.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, those are the two times. But yeah, no, that's that it takes a specific brand of comedy to be successful on that show. You know
Yeah,
what
you know what it is? You got to be able to work quick. You
I'm
got to be able to work quick. And I do like set up, punch, bang, bang, bang. So it did well. I'll tell you, as a judge, the big one we missed, we passed on Lil Rel.
what what
He didn't even make it through the first round.
wow.
And
That's
I saw him, years later. I saw him, and I said, "Yo, man, let me let me talk to you." I said, "Man, I want to apologize. I guess we were wrong." And he just laughed. He was cool as hell about it, but it was really funny. It was like, "Yeah, I guess we missed on that one." You,
right, right. No, but again, that's how comedy is though. I mean, it's a subjective thing. Like
yeah,
some
and
people like this flavor, some people like this flavor. Because I
and
heard
when you do a show like that, and a lot of people didn't like the show, and it's like I get why they didn't like it because, like you said, comedy has 31 flavors, but it was our chance to be on primetime TV, you know?
right.
And part of it is you just got to pick the right set for that night.
Mm,
You know what I mean? Like, because when I was a judge, man, it was crazy. There were comics that we knew were great comics, right? But they did the wrong jokes that night. And we couldn't pass you based on reputation.
mm,
We had to
mm.
judge.
Your
Well,
performance
for
that
one thing, we
night.
weren't the only judges, right? There were producers who also vote on who's going to move on and this or that. But it was like we had to do it based on that night. So there were people like, man, we know you're funny. We know you're funnier than, I opened for you. you know? But if they didn't bring it that night on the stage, there's no way, there's nothing you could do.
Right, right. No, that's crazy, man. Yeah. So that show hasn't been on for a few years now, huh?
No, man, it went through so many changes. They changed the format. They They changed the producers, the judge. Wanda Sykes ran it for the last couple of years, and
Mm.
but they could never recap. Just like we were talking about,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
the early part of the show, it was a lot like Idol. It was like, even though we were pros, they tried to pretend we had come out of nowhere. Like, you know what I mean? But
Right, right.
the only ones who really had a name when we did it was like Kathleen Madigan had, she had already done HBO special and a bunch of Tonight shows, and there weren't many, people knew who Todd Glass was, but we had all just started doing stuff. We had done like the cable shows,
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
stuff. I had done a show called Make Me Laugh, and
Oh yeah.
I did Keenan's late night show. Like I
Mm-hmm.
hadn't done the Tonight Show, but I had done Keenan when Keenan had a late night show for a year. So we were all like that. Like Heffron had been on. He was a radio guy out of Detroit. Like he had hosted a morning radio show and stuff, So we had worked, but we weren't. Nobody was really a name,
Right.
you know.
Um, those seasons, you guys still had to live in the house, right?
Yeah, we lived together. We lived in the castle. We did the whole reality show thing. Yep.
Yeah, because they eventually took that part out. Like to me, that was the hardest part, yo. Like
They
living.
took that part out and they lost a lot of fans. A lot of the
Mm,
fans like that because, and again, when you're doing it, you don't realize it. But what it was when you go to compete, they know who you are, right?
mm,
So now they've become more of a fan because they've like see like, oh man, that's Kareem. I remember when he did blah 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 in the kitchen,
right. They see how
or
you live.
right, right. Or, oh yeah, Corey. Oh yeah, Corey and Ant had that argument. What's it gonna be like on stage? So
Right,
it
right.
did. It did add. It added a level to it. You know what I'm saying? Like for the audience was more interested because they knew who we were. And
Right.
again, it's reality TV, and they edit it, and they get certain things, and they try to create
There
fights
it
and
is.
stories and stuff. But the truth was the audience felt more invested because they saw you.
Mm, interesting. Interesting. Yeah, to me as a comic, I always looked at that as the hardest part. You know what I mean? Like the
You know
living.
what, man? It was boring. Man, it was like the pandemic without the
Oh,
internet. We
ooh.
lived in this. They had this old castle up in the Hollywood Hills, right? So we're in there. No TV. No. Again, this is early internet days. This is like early 2000s. But yeah, no, we couldn't bring in any laptops or we couldn't even read newspapers. Like they didn't want us to know anything
Okay.
outside of what was going on in there. And we would end up, you know how it is, man. When you're on the road, when you're in, in some
Right.
town you don't know during the day, you just sit there like reading a book or like they would want us to talk to each other and this and it's like we're
That's my
comics, man.
competitor.
Yeah, we're comics. We comics are lazy as shit until you give us a stage.
Right, right. Yeah. We're good for fucking off daytimes.
Exactly. Exactly. It's funny because we'll go to a city and people are like, "Did you see this?" And like, "Nah, I ain't see shit. I saw the hotel."
And the club. Ask me about those two things. I've become an expert already. You know what I'm saying? Oh, that's cool, man. So you also have been one of the hosts for the Family Feud, right? For the
Yeah, we did a live one. It was toured like we were doing it in casinos and theaters. It was fun, man. We had Chris Kattan and Pauly Shore were the captains, and then we would pick members of the audience to be the families.
mm,
And but then we ran it just like the show, and it was fun being the host and you because you never know what the questions are and the answers were funnier. Our favorite answer was we were somewhere, I don't even remember where, I think we were in Connecticut, and the question was like we surveyed 100 women, and what do you do when you find out your husband has been cheating, right? And this old lady, Kareem, this lady had to be like 80 years old. She couldn't even get out of the chair, right? I had to like lean down to her with the microphone. And her answer was, "You beat his ass." And it was the number two answer.
What? Oh, that's hilarious. She said beat his ass
She
too.
said, "You beat his ass."
Oh, that is hilarious.
Yeah, we had a lot of moments like that. It was fun. Paulie was giving Chris Kattan hell. Paulie was treating Chris Kattan like his big brother, like
Mm.
and Paulie's out of his mind anyway. But
Right.
yeah, we had a good time. So we must have done like 20 shows up and down the East Coast, and we'd have done it again, except the pandemic hit, so they had to cancel. We were going to do the tour again last fall,
Mm.
but after the pandemic, they had to cancel all the shows. But that was a fun gig. That
Yeah,
was
I
a
was
fun
gonna
gig.
say that when I saw you doing that, I was like, that's actually a very good role for Alonzo. You know what I mean?
It
Like,
was, man. I couldn't have been happier. It was perfect for me. Problem is Steve Harvey won't quit any of his jobs.
right,
You
and
know.
that's he looking for more work. He hosting versus battles now. But yeah, no, if he does step down, I think you would be one of the top
I
candidates.
like I like hosting, man. I've gotten to host, some car shows and game shows. I hosted the awards show at Just for Laughs a few times.
Mm,
Hosting to me, it's a fun gig because I'm free to say what I want, right? I'm not like there's an outline but not a script, you
right,
know. So
right.
I can play with that as opposed to like acting where you get a script and you got to become a different person.
Mm,
I'm not good at that,
mm,
I'm not good
right,
at that. But hosting where it's like, okay, this is what we need you to say. Now go say it however you want.
right,
That I can do.
right, right. No, yeah, I like that role for you. Um, I got to bring this up. You're a Clipper fan.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
How did that come about?
I ain't ashamed. I love the Clippers. You know how it came about? So I moved here. I moved to LA in the 80s, right? I was here for Showtime. And I loved Showtime. I loved Magic and Worthy, Kareem, like those teams. I used to hate the Celtics and all in it was. But man, I ain't have enough money to go to those games. You know
Mm,
how much it costs to go to a Magic Johnson Clipper. This is even back in the day. It was maybe $200 to sit up in the nosebleeds. You know what I
right,
mean? And
right.
I didn't have that kind of money, but you could go to a Clipper game for 15 or $20. I'm not making this up. The Clippers played in the sports arena, and you could go for like you could get a cheap ticket for $25, right? But then nobody was there. So you just walk down and sit in the hundreds, right? You buy a ticket for the 300s and go. And the fun part was, even though they sucked, I mean, some of those teams were so bad, with Benoit Benjamin and just
Michael
the
K.
Clippers would always draft people who you thought were going to be somebody, then they turned out to be not. Oliver Miller, who ended up weighing 350
Mm,
pounds, and just
Michael Olowokandi.
Candy, on and on. It was they'd always have one or two good players. Like they had, Danny Manning was good,
Oh,
but he ain't
right,
get no help.
right, right.
Doc Rivers' team, when Doc was there, they made the playoffs once, but that was unusual. But the reason I became a Clippers fan is it was more fun to go watch the Clippers because they would play hard. They just weren't that good, right?
Right,
But
right,
that was
right.
more fun than when you go to a Laker game. People were there. They weren't there for the game. They were there to see who else was there. It was a
Mm,
scene. It was a
right,
party. It
right,
was it was
right.
it was the club.
It
Going to
still
a Clipper
is.
game. I mean, going to a Laker game was all of that. Going to a Clipper game, it was just the basketball. Then, when they started to get good, they were good with Elton Brand, but really after they got Blake, and then they brought in CP3 and DeAndre. They got good, and it was fun because it like Clipper fans, we all felt like, yeah, we were here when the team wasn't shit. Like we got to
Mm,
enjoy it more. You know what I mean? Like we
right.
yeah, we earned this. But the funny thing was when they had that, you started seeing more and more hot women at the games, and
Mm.
you started seeing celebrities drop in. Like next thing you know, there was a few Kardashians sniffing around because if there's ball players, they're gonna be Kardashians. And the Queen Latifah's at the game and Anthony Anderson's at the game. Because they always show people, and you started seeing it was like, yeah, see now we getting some respect. Then they sucked again, and everybody left.
Back to the Laker games. But you're still a fan though, and see that's the
Always, yeah,
yeah,
it's fun, man. And the other thing about the Clippers, there's a lot of comics who are fans, and when we go to the games, we're texting each other because we're all at the game, right? So I have season tickets. Eric Griffin has season tickets. Jimmy O Yang has season tickets. Christella Alonzo has tickets.
oh,
Sully McCullough comes to a lot of games.
mm,
PK comes to a lot, and so we're at the game, right? Texting each other about the game, just laughing and joke and having a good time. So yeah, man, it's fun. Rondell Sheridan. Rondell has great seats.
oh really?
Rondell's seats are on the floor in the corner right across from the tunnel where the players come in.
Oh yeah.
He's right there. So
Mm.
I sat with him one game and we were talking with Doc Rivers, because
Wow.
Doc was walking right there and it was,
Wow.
yeah, but it's
Uh,
fun, man. I love it. I love it. And again, those tickets that cost, to sit down like in the 100 section, a $200 ticket at a Clipper game is a $500 or $600 ticket at a Laker
Laker
game.
game. Right, right.
It's
Richard
still
Barrett.
like that.
Richard Barrett.
I'm sorry?
Richard Barrett from
Yeah,
College
yeah.
Graduate.
Richards had season tickets for the Clippers, I think since like '91 or something. Like
Yeah.
he's old school. He got great seats and he goes to a lot of games. And again, it's just fun, because we're all there bumping into each other, talking, and yeah, it's all good.
Yeah, no, and that's why, like, you guys, I don't give shit about being Clipper fans because I know you guys have been Clipper fans for forever. And that's why when you mention those comics, because those are the ones that I was going to bring up, like, it's only a handful of people that I know that are real Clipper fans. And it's basically you guys. Because when they got good with Lob City, it was a lot of people jumping on the bandwagon.
Yeah,
And then last year, when they got PG, and they were supposed to win it. It was another time when it was a lot more bandwagoners. But I'm like, yo, it's a handful of dudes that I know that were Clipper fans back in the day, and you guys are not one of them.
man, I'm mad at PG because he disappeared in the playoffs last year.
Mm-hmm.
I
Yeah.
said he was like Blake Griffin. Like how you talk about pressure. Blake ain't shit under pressure.
No,
Blake Blake could never win a big game. You know what I mean? Like when the pressure was on, he would disappear. CP3 could play under pressure. So yeah, last year. So this year, I'm like, EG, you got to show me what you could do in the playoffs. During the season, you're great,
we've
but show
seen
me what
that.
you could do during the playoffs.
Right. We've seen that movie of you in the season. No, that's always going to be the Clippers' knock until they get there. Is they have never made out the second round. You know what
They
I
got
mean?
to finish, man. And I love Doc Rivers. I love Doc. But Doc had two chances with two different teams, and he didn't do it.
Right. Up 3-1.
Yeah, he had Lob City, and then he had Kawhi and PG, and both times he couldn't finish. So, good luck in Philly.
Right, it was time for a change. No, I mean, because I've been a Ram fan since they were here the last time, so I know that feeling about sitting with a team through the bad times, and then when those good times finally come around, you know what I mean? You're like, yo, I'm invested in this.
Yeah, I don't. It's like I'm a sort of NFL fan, and I don't really have a team. I used to be a Jet fan growing up when I was a kid in New York, but I don't really have a team. And I was thinking, I wonder if I should become a Chargers fan because
Uh,
the Chargers are kind of like the Clippers. You,
totally,
you know what I mean? Like
totally.
they're the other team.
Right. Now that would be perfect for you, man. That's funny. You said back in New York. So I know you're from New York. Is that where you started? How did you
No,
start?
I started in L.A.
Okay.
I moved to L.A. I used to be in aerospace business, and I moved here in that business. I used to work at Lockheed in Burbank and
Oh,
McDonnell Douglas
really?
in Long Beach. Yeah, that was the first career I had. So I started doing comedy here. So I'm an LA comic from New York.
That's interesting. That's
Yeah, the
crazy.
first time I went to work in New York, man, I was nervous because New York is rough, and New York comics are rough,
Right,
but
right.
that's how they appear. But the truth is, they were really cool. They took me around to do spots, and again, it's the respect you get. When I could go to the cellar, and I could fuck with anybody in there, and they know me. You know what I mean? So that's the cool part. Now, and also when I started in the '90s, right? And back in the '90s, comedy was in LA because it was all about sitcoms, right? Everybody had a show. Seinfeld had his show, Drew Carey had his show, Ray Romano had his show. Um, what was her name?
Roseanne.
Roseanne had a show. But anyway, all these people. So back in the '90s, comics wanted to come to LA to get a sitcom, right? That's what. But then in the early 2000s, comedy went to New York because all the late night shows were in New York, and Comedy Central was plucking everybody from New York, and the big name comics like Chris Rock, Louis C.K. at the time, Amy Schumer, they all lived in New York and they were staying in New York. They would fly to L.A. to shoot a movie, but then they went back to New York. So the comedy scene kind of shifted to New York. But by then, because Trevor Noah, we had talked, and Trevor talked to me about writing for the Daily Show. But I was like, Trevor, I already got a life in LA. I can't go to New York as a beginning writer. You know what I
Mm,
mean?
right.
And live in a one bedroom apartment with three roommates. Like
I'm not
I'm
at
too
that
old for
stage of
that.
my career.
Right. I'm too, and I love Trevor. Trevor's cool as hell. And if I was making Trevor money, I could move to New York.
Right,
But
right.
yeah, I'm an LA guy.
And it's funny that you were talking about the transition of comedy from the early '90s in LA and in the 2000s to New York, because I feel like we're in one of those moments right now. Like, how do you feel about the current state of comedy and like where that's headed? Because like Joe Rogan's packed up and moved to Texas. Like, I've seen a lot of people making that move, like Texas
A
and
lot of
Florida.
people are following Joe, and Joe's another guy who I've known for 20 years. I knew Joe from the Laugh Factory back in the '90s and whatnot. And he said, "Man, you ever think of moving?" And I was like, "I'm not done with LA yet." Now for Joe, just based on taxes, he saved millions of dollars by
Right,
moving. But he wanted to get out of LA. But Joe has always been his own guy, right? Joe has never been Hollywood's guy. Joe does what Joe wants to do, and it just works out for me. I say he trips and falls into gold mines, you
right.
know,
No, that's
with the
true.
whole MMA thing
Mm.
and his podcast is fire. I love his podcast and good for him on that. But yeah, some comics are moving. So some followed him to Austin, and then another bunch went to Nashville, right?
Mm.
Because
Mm.
Nashville is it's easy to travel up and down the East Coast and the Midwest and do all those things. I'm not done with LA yet, man. I'm lucky enough to still be able to pay the rent and live in LA, and I still like it. A lot of people don't like it. I still like it. The Laugh Factory is my favorite stage on earth, man. I miss the days
Mm.
of going to the Laugh Factory 3 times a week and doing spots.
Mm.
That I hope those days come back.
Me too, man.
Um,
I love hearing you say that, yo, because a lot of people shit on LA, you know what I mean? But this is my city too.
yeah,
Like, I'm not going anywhere. I don't care how the comedy game changes. I feel like LA is always gonna have a place in the business, regardless of how it morphs. You know what I mean? We still gonna have our little scene here. So
yeah. I mean, listen, people have always shit on LA, but they weren't going anywhere. You know, it's like, well, why, if you don't like it, why don't you leave? And they wasn't leaving.
right, right.
There are certain people. Yeah, you can be a comic from anywhere. I mean, I looked at one point. I was looking at moving to Scottsdale, right? Because I
Mm.
could get like a much nicer house, and all you need to be a comic is an airport, right? So you can fly. But you can't do you can't do spots every night. Now, some guys have gone to Vegas and they're making Vegas work. And again, good for you if you do that. I love Vegas. I don't know that I'd want to live in Vegas.
Right. Right.
Um, yeah, I don't know if I'd want to live there
Yeah, it's a
because you.
lot of Oh no, go ahead.
No, you're right. That's the temptation. You could blow your life up in Vegas.
Man, nah, and it's crazy because that leads me to the last thing I want to bring up. I saw you had posted recently, man, about your sobriety.
Yeah,
Was it 30 years?
33, 33
Yo,
years.
yo. When I saw that, man, I was like, yo, like that's an amazing ass story, man. Cause I know about sobriety issues. Like I've had family members that deal with that shit, and that's 33 years, man.
And it's funny. I did a podcast with Rogan about this because Joe couldn't believe it. But in the '80s, I got caught up. Cocaine, crack, the whole
Mm-hmm.
thing, and I bottomed out. I got arrested. I got busted, right? And I was in jail, and just for a night, just one night in jail. But it was enough for it to be that moment for me to say, nah, this ain't the life. This is not like this isn't where I plan to end up, right? Because the danger of that is for that to become normal. You know what I'm saying? Like you've been around it, you've seen it. I didn't want going to jail become a normal part of life because people do that, right?
Oh,
It
no.
becomes it
They
becomes
come out on
okay.
vacations.
Right. It becomes okay. And I didn't, so yeah. And then I was lucky, man. I was lucky. I went into rehab and I ended up at this place called Studio 12. And this is part of how my comedy career started, right?
Mm.
So the stars went to Betty Ford and the crew went to Studio 12. And I was in rehab with, cameramen and makeup artists and wardrobe designers and, all of the
Mm.
crew, the
Craft
grips, the
services.
electricians. But they were the ones. So I learned the business by being around them,
Interesting.
and they were the ones who were like, yeah, you could do this shit. You don't have to be, because when you're not in Hollywood, right? When you're not in the business, it looks like I can't do that. Like, what is that? How do you get into that? But
Right.
then I met people who were in it and they were like, yeah, you could do it. This is, just do your thing and it grows. And they were like, just
Mm.
focus on the work and this and that. And
Mm.
there was a lot of support and a lot of experience around me. And that, like, when I won Last Comic, some people were like, man, you're pretty humble about winning. And it was like, yeah, because, I got friends with a shelf full of Emmys at home. You know what I mean? And they're the ones who taught me, like, all of that shit is cool, but that's just part of the work. It's not like the first time I met a guy with he had 2 Emmys. And I was like, damn. Because I went to his house. Like, he had them on the bookshelf. And I was
Right.
looking. I was like, are those what I
Real?
think they are? Like, are those? And he was like, yeah, I got a couple of them. And I was like, so
Mm.
you're like really good. He said, I don't look for work. Work looks for me.
Mm.
That was his attitude.
Wow.
He's
I
like
love
like
it.
that like that's the ultimate resume, right?
Right.
Like,
Right.
so yeah, so and it really is a day at a time, man, and it just adds up. Days become months, months become years, and it's the foundation, right, for everything else I do. And it keeps me grounded. It keeps me grounded. It reminds me what's real.
Mm.
Because you know how Hollywood is, man. Hollywood ain't real. How many people have said they love you? You know,
Oh man, everybody.
I've
Those
never
people in the
gotten a
media.
job from someone who loved me. Not once did someone who loved me hire me.
Mm.
You know,
Mm.
so yeah, it's 33, man. 33 and counting.
So you just did the rehab one time, and then you were like, I
No,
got this.
no, it took the second time. The first time I only lasted a few weeks,
Mm.
but the second
Okay.
time I knew I was done. That's what you got to know. You got to know you're done.
Okay.
You
Okay.
know,
No.
I heard this guy, and I'm not gonna violate his anonymity, but I will tell you, he's a major movie star, right? and he was telling his story, and he said, he had been like he had been to jail, and he'd been, the TMZ, he's drunk in the middle of the street, and all of that movie star shit. And he said he was in Santa Monica, and he saw a homeless guy in the alley, and he realized, he said, I'm the same as that guy. He's
Mm.
like, I'm the same. I just got more money. He said,
Right
but I'm.
now.
He was like, I'm exactly like. And he said something clicked, and he hasn't had a drink since. He hasn't got high since. But he just
Mm.
realized in that moment, it's a personal thing for people. Like when you reach that point with yourself where you're like, yeah, I can't bullshit anymore. I'm done. I
Mm.
can't. You run out of lies. You run out of lies. Like you say, you've dealt with. We've all been around it. Everyone's got, a family member or a friend or somebody and that's why finally we're getting away from putting people in jail and instead sending them to rehab. And I work with a thing. It's called the Drug Courts of America, right? And the whole purpose is to send nonviolent drug offenders to rehab rather than to jail. I got a friend in Tulsa, Oklahoma. She's a lawyer, and she's part of this organization getting people. There are people still in jail for weed.
I know. How ridiculous is that,
So
yo? Doing
her
hard time.
organization, yeah, her organization and the lawyers, they fight to get these people out because you had a bag of weed on you in 1998
And you
and
still
you're
in
still in
jail.
jail.
Yo, that's crazy, man.
Hmm.
Well, man, I want to thank you, Alonzo. This has been a hell of a conversation, man. We got to touch on a lot of stuff here, man. I
Man,
really appreciate
this has been fantastic, man. Like I say, it's like we were talking about with Montreal. We don't get to do this,
it.
right?
Right,
We
right.
don't get to just sit down and kick it and catch up and whatever else. So, man, much love to you, brother. Thank you. Send me the link. I'm gonna post it, and
You
we'll
got
see.
anything? You got anything you want to plug?
Man, my yeah, yeah. What is it? April 30th. I'm going to the Improv in Denver.
Oh, okay. Yeah, nah. That's hey man, back on the road, yo.
Back on the road, man. And Supernova. If you go to supernovacomedy.com, there are outdoor shows in Hollywood that I do. I'm doing one this Sunday, and I'll still be doing those until the club's officially open. So check out Supernova
Okay, okay. And then you're Alonzo Bodden on all platforms,
on
Instagram,
all
Facebook.
platforms. On Instagram, I'm Zo Funny, ZOFUNNY. But everything else, if you go to alonzobowden.com, it's hooked to everything. Everything's off my page.
Okay, cool. Well, again, man, thanks a lot, Alonzo. I really appreciate you doing this, man. This was
Much
really
love,
cool.
brother. Thank you, Kareem.
Have a good one.
Late.